Hello, and welcome
Hey,
to a student's perspective. We have a very special guest today, and we're delighted to connect with this person. I have a lot of respect, and I'm looking forward to the all sorts of wonderful answers that have come from Jericho here. So before we kind of get into the questions, let's do some introductions. I'm Mike. I'm one of the associate directors here at the Career Center for Students Perspective. This program here that we have today. And I'm going to bounce it over to Jericho, who's offered to, go through this process and give some insight for you as students.
hi, I'm Jericho Lopez. I'm with J&J Digital Studio. So I've spent the last 20 years actually building and running marketing teams. And now I do that for myself as a consultant after many years in kind of higher education in the restaurant world. And so I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Oh, thanks. Well, we're so delighted to have you too. All right. So first question is, I know you connect with all sorts of different kinds of people. One of our students has asked the question, what is the best way to connect with employers?
Yeah, great question. Networking would be my top answer. And there's lots of ways for networking. So career fairs, definitely. I know UC San Diego has a lot of those. It's a great way to get out there. Be vocal, stop by the booths, introduce yourself. I think sometimes as students or even just as professionals, we don't advocate for ourselves. So I think it's important when you are networking to advocate for yourself. Find out what you can offer people and what they can offer you. Go to events. A lot of brands and organizations will have events. Show up there. Make sure your face is seen and people know your name. LinkedIn is a really great place. I think it's full of professionals networking with each other. So it's a great way to kind of naturally slide in and introduce yourself. But I would say you can do all of these things, but don't forget to advocate for yourself and be vocal about what you're looking for, where your value is, and what you need.
Well said. Wow, awesome, and that's wonderful. Thank you, Jericho. We're going to jump to another question about changing fields. Some folks don't have a linear path these days, right? And also the same career trajectory. What would your advice be for an individual trying to make a field change?
Oh, gosh, coming from someone who made a change, it can be hard. It can be daunting and scary. And you're like, am I going to be good at this? Am I not? But deep in your soul, you know you are. So I would say my advice would be to trust yourself. If you really want to do this, it could potentially be hard. It could potentially be very easy for someone, but trust yourself and know that you're making the right decisions. I would say take education into your own hands. And so there are a lot of things. I did spend some time at running the marketing department for UC San Diego Extension. And so there are a lot of certificates and things that you can get to help advance your education. I think that really shows to an employer, if you haven't been working in that field, that you can A, advocate for yourself, but B, you have initiative to try to learn in the field. So I think that's really critical. That can be conferences. It doesn't have to be through an educational pathway. It can be conferences, networking. There are so many digital conferences that happen now that are free. So take advantage of all that. You don't have to have a lot of money to do that. But educate yourself and build a network in the field that you're trying to get into would be my advice.
This is good advice. This is great. Thank you. All right, so we've got some background a little bit with the connecting. There's some kind of streams that are flowing through here in terms of, really important things like trust yourself and networking and those these are outstanding. Now let's talk a little bit about one of the questions that is very specific actually. With trends of the youth moving positions within 2-year time frame rather than a long-term time commitment with one company, as we've seen with some generations. Do you feel that employers are looking for longevity or transition to seek with someone with diverse experience?
Hmm, that's a really good question, actually. I would say that it varies. I think this is where it's really critical to understand the company, the people in the positions that you're interviewing with, the kind of long-term goals of that company, and A, find out if you're the right fit, but B, um, that will give you a lot of insight as to what they are looking for in kind of filling that position per se. So I think in some companies, right, potentially, I'm just making the scenario up, but potentially they're looking to sell the company in the next 3 to 5 years. They're looking for someone who can come in, hit the ground running, make immediate change, and be there for 3 years. And then when they sell, kind of a lot of times people move on, right? So that is looking for short term. I think if you're looking at a company who wants to build brand, building brand takes a lot of time. Is it a new company that's trying to establish themselves and to figure out who they are as a brand and start to engage people and build relationships? That takes more time. And so I think a role that's looking for that would probably be someone that is there more long term, right? To establish the brand and then help kind of bring that to life. So, I think it's really about understanding the needs of the organization, and your own personal desires and making sure those kind of align, and then getting in those interviews or in those networking opportunities and selling yourself for that. And the other thing too is like, is there, when we talk about long term, maybe you're there for 2 years, but you're moving into a new position after that time, right? So I think there's so many variables. I also think that there are generations that are hiring that are used to people staying for a long time. And so I think it's hard and challenging sometimes for those managers or those people at the top to kind of look at 2 years as being a credible time. So I would just consider the environment and the scenario and the goals of the business, because I think it does vary depending on the goals of business.
Wow, very, very thorough, very well thought. Well said, I would say for sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump into a little bit different area in terms of application and interview. Student put this question out there. What is the best piece of advice for undergraduates during their job application and interview process that you would have for them?
Also a good question. These are good questions.
Great questions.
Good questions and real life questions. Yeah, this is a hard one. I would say I probably have a lot of advice, but I would say the most critical piece again would be just don't get discouraged, right? Job hunting can be draining. It can be a full-time job. It's a lot to kind of go through some of these applications are, 2 to 3 pages. And so it's exhaustive, right? Going through all of these things. And so don't be discouraged, because it can be discouraging if you go through that process and then you don't get an interview or you don't get a job and you're like, why am I doing this? You're doing it because you need to find the right fit too. And I think that leads me into the interview process, is that remember that an interview isn't just about the employer finding you as a good fit for the role. It's about you finding a fit with an employer. And so don't forget about yourself in the process. And that can be scary because you're like, I just need to get a job. I want to get a job as soon as I get out of school, or I need to pay my bills, or whatever your scenario may be. But there's nothing worse in finding a poor culture fit with an organization because you were kind of rushing to get into that role. So don't forget that you matter too in the interview process, and that, someone will appreciate your skill set. So stay at it, keep with it, and make sure you're networking to get into those interviews and job applications, because I think whether we love it or not, those rise to the top usually.
Thank you, Jericho. You matter. This is good. This is really good stuff. I mean, yes, thank you for sharing your insight here, and answering these things in the way that really are real and connected to the deep question. So, yeah, okay. We'll jump into the next question here. So, in the screening process and talking to recruiters, kind of a little bit of a couple things you talked about, but what would make an applicant stand out as a candidate in the screening process? And the second part of the question is, would you recommend reaching out to recruiters or current employees at the company?
I'll answer the second one first. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely reach out to current employees and recruiters. I think this goes back to kind of my core piece of human advice, which is advocating for yourself. And it's not uncommon. I'm an outgoing person, so something like this for me feels natural, but there are a lot of people that it feels unnatural for. But I'm here to tell you that it's totally natural. Do it. And don't let your self-conscience get in the way because, nobody's going to come and find you and just show up at your door. You have to get out there and people need to know what you're looking for and why you want to be at the company. Now back to the first part of the question, which is what makes an applicant stand out. For me personally, and I'm sure it varies for whoever's interviewing, I think, I'm looking for more in the kind of interview process. Obviously you're at the table and your application is here because you are professionally qualified for this or you want the job. Things that help people stand out in my mind is research on the organization. So do you really understand A, the position you're going for, and B, the organization? And that can come through. I don't expect anybody to be super knowledgeable, but that can come through in the questions that you ask about my company or the organization I'm with. Have you really done your research? Are you very interested in where we're headed? What's going on? Are you aware of how relevant we are or unrelevant we are? And then you spend a lot of time working, 90% of your time or something is spent in a job. And so I want to understand people personally. So I think that, you have to be a good fit on both sides, professionally and personally. And I want to know the kind of person that I'm hiring. I feel like I can teach a craft. So be vulnerable and be open and share about who you are and kind of what you do in your personal time. Obviously, it has to relate back professionally to kind of decision making and relationships and communication, which are valuable in the workplace as well. But yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself. I think those things help people stand out. And you know what? If they don't hire you because of it, you probably lucked out.
Wow. This is great. Thank you so much. We're coming down to the last couple of questions here from our students' perspective questions. One of them here is, what has made past candidates successful in their interviews? And what's a memorable question that someone has asked you about their company that showed that they did the research or expressed interest, as you mentioned before, kind of wanting to go a little bit deeper?
Yeah. Of course, qualifications. I think that's really critical. Like, have you worked in this space? And as students, maybe you haven't really had time working professionally in the field that you're going into, but your ability to tie skills and skill sets to the skills and skill sets needed to accomplish the job. And so I feel like that is a successful thing to learn. But yeah, your ability to communicate and ask questions and listen, and then use that to navigate a conversation, I think is really critical. Because you'll learn and it requires you to be on your feet and understand what people are saying and really kind of listen to that. And so yeah, your ability to communicate, I think, helps you stand out, and your ability to bridge kind of your life experiences, if you don't have professional experiences, with the skill set required on the job.
Thank you. All right, so this last question is an interesting question. I know some students ask this quite a bit, actually, in terms of coursework. So it's relating coursework on a resume. So the question is how important, in your perspective, is or relevant is coursework on an applicant's resume? In the scope that there's so many different universities that are out there that are applying. Like, how does this play out in your experience, or what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I don't know if I ever necessarily would be looking at the framework of the coursework. I would be looking at what did you learn in that coursework, and how have you applied it to getting this role or to other areas of your life. So again, if you don't have kind of professional experience, it's like, okay, so I went through and I learned this type of coursework and I accomplished it. What will set you apart is saying, I learned this, I did this coursework, and I accomplished it by doing this. And applying it to different areas of your life and how you kind of didn't just learn it, but you practically applied what you learned, I think is really important here. And calling it out, I mean, sometimes an employer is like, gosh, we really want someone who does this or this, but they're not going to be forward with that in an interview, right? Because if they are, then they fear you might be like, well, I'm that. So being able to identify and be vocal about, in order to do this coursework, it took patience, dedication, it took tenacity, going back and forth, talking to different people, picking up the phone, making calls, being in the field, emotionally trying to support this coursework. So I think there are different kind of soft skills that you can bring up and show were necessary. And then there's kind of obviously the hard skills of, and this is how I applied it in my daily life or in the job that I'm currently in. And this is how I would apply it if I took this role.
Perfect. Perfect. So I just wanna open to you, Jericho. If there's anything else you want to kind of add in terms of something from something you wanted to add that we didn't cover in this, and these questions here that you might want to impart to those that are watching this and learning from your wonderful wisdom and just a wonderful perspective. So I want to give you some time to if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I would just say stick at it, it's okay to evolve and change your mind and change career paths and or college pathways and network, get out there, advocate for yourself and really assess what is the value that you bring somewhere and make sure you're vocal about that.
Well, thank you. So here we are, kind of at the end of our wonderful Students Perspective program today. I would just like to say a huge, huge thank you to Jericho. She's an amazing person, and I'm lucky to know her. And I think that the wisdom that she was talking about today, I hope you walk away with some great insights that you can carry on your whole life, not just for the next job and opportunity. And as we say here, again, as Mike, one of the associate directors, pronouns he, him, and his, and we're from University of California, San Diego, signing off here with Jericho Lopez. So thank you so much. Hope that you have another opportunity down the road to connect with us. Thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good luck, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.